the MidCoast Watershed Council and a bunch of partners, including Oregon State Parks, Siuslaw National Forest, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Soil and Water Conservation District. So in any event, I get to wear a lot of hats with a lot of partners. And I'm going to be talking about landscape conservation, Cape Perpetua to Heceta Head, marine reserves, seabirds, and salmon restoration efforts down south. So here we go. And marine reserves are a part of my story because the MidCoast Watershed Council has the near shore as part of their priority area. And within Oregon's Marine Reserve Ocean Program, our Cape Perpetua Marine Reserve and Seabird Protected Area is the largest in the state. It's 20 miles long. So it's a part of our footprint for conservation. And so I'll be giving you the primer on that issue, walk you through the value of marine reserves, what we've got going locally, and how it fits within larger efforts. These are other issues I'll be talking about: marbled marrowlet, and some landscape carbon issues and conservation issues. So some of you probably got to watch Cammie Ellingson from the Forest Service talking about the Salmon River estuary. So this is the footprint that our Watershed Council works in. Ballpark is about 1 million acres. So she got to give a talk a few months ago on the Salmon River estuary. That's the northern block there. And then now we're down in the southern block, the Cummins 10-mile block, and Yachats. And that's the Heceta Head Perpetua. And so we'll be, eventually, the Watershed Council will have talks on every one of these little basins. And so I'm the second one out of multiple landscape conservation events. So you're looking north. Way up in the distance there is actually Cascade Head. And that little community right there is our local community, Yachats. And the Marine Reserve goes halfway up that beach there towards Walport. And this is in the southern headland. This is Heceta Head. It's a lighthouse. And the southern end, where the Seabird Protected Area is, a Marine Reserve, the Seabird Protected Area is, goes south of here to a stream just north of Florence. And so I'll be sharing partners, sites, species, projects, and I've got a lot of things. And the plan is to be able to share these with you, open up some understanding of what we've got going, which is pretty impressive here on the Central Coast with all our partners. And so here's the quick about marine reserves, marine protected areas, and then we won't really have to talk about it on the other sites, but our Lincoln County has 3 of the 5 marine reserves, marine protected areas, and that's why it makes sense for me to introduce everybody to this issue. And here are the 5 sites, and Cape Falcon, Cascade Head, Otter Rock, our Cape Perpetua site, and then Redfish Rocks down in the south, Port Orford. And so I was a part of the Ocean Policy Advisory Council when we moved this issue forward. And so it isn't, when we talk about marine conservation, it isn't just about fish. It's about fish that you can catch. It's also about prey base, seabirds, whales, sea lions. So it's marine biodiversity. And when we were on OPAC, the Ocean Policy Advisory Council, we came up with a policy guidance document talking about protecting key habitats and using them as reference areas. There's a really nice document for folks that are interested in that type of thing that you can chew on, and it's really a solid document. But when we do talk about rockfish, just so you know, they're very old, some of them, and they're very fecund, very fertile. And so just give you the idea, quillback can be 90 years old, and some of them, China, can be 80. You go further out onto the shelf, you've got some that are 120, and the rough-eye over 200 years. So they're long-lived, and they're very fecund, lots of offspring. So this is a vermilion rockfish, capable of releasing 1.7 million larvae. And so that idea of a species that's incredibly valuable for rebuilding and recovery and fishery benefits, protecting that older component so she can continue to put them out into the water column. Is a very good conservation strategy. And so this is at the top of the Cape. This is one of my partners from the Cape Perpetua Visitors Center. We get to use this as our outdoor school. And so marine reserves, fully protected. You can't remove animals or plants. And then around the world, there are hundreds of reserves, but only 1% of the ocean really is fully protected. And scientists have studied 124 around the world, and the consistent results: increased biomass, diversity, size of fish within the marine reserves. And here's the map of where they're doing research project. And when this map was created, as you can see in Oregon, there's no red dot. Well, now we have a red dot there with our marine reserves, and research by ODFW and Oregon State and a number of other organizations are doing research in Oregon now related to protecting marine biodiversity. And here's the consistent results: increased biomass, density, size, diversity. Whether you're in tropical or temperate waters, it's a good news story. You protect, and then you have this increase in productivity. And here's the map of the footprint from Cape Falcon down. Ballpark, it's about 9% of our territorial sea is protected. And here's the footprint of our Cape Perpetua site from north of Yachats, Smelt Sand State Park, and then the Marine Reserve no-take area. That's at the Visitors Center, Cape Perpetua Visitors Center, down to the mouth of 10 Mile Creek. And then south of there is a Seabird protected area and a marine protected area, which is you can fish for some things, but not everything. And so on this little visual scape, these are partners. So I get to take this professor's class out every year, and you get a new group of students. And so you'll see some of the folks that get to come and visit me at the sanctuary at the Cape, and we get to talk about these real issues out in the field. And sometimes you get a visitor like this on its way to Alaska. And Sea Lion Caves is one of our partners. And it's the world's largest sea cave, or North America's largest sea cave. And they're a partner for our field trips. And there are 60 small disjunct rocky patches in our ocean footprint. And so since we have a terrestrial strategy dealing with Cummins Creek, 10 Mile Creek, Big Creek, we call it a ridgetop to reef conservation strategy. So there's work going on in the uplands as well as in the near shore. And here's the footprint that we deal with in the uplands. Yachats there, and then the two wildernesses, and between the two wilderness is 10 Mile Creek and the Audubon Sanctuary. And we've just secured some other parcels in that basin. But we've dealt with watershed restoration, dealing with in-stream projects, working with ODFW and the Siuslaw National Forest, riparian plantings, road decommissioning, a list of things on this busy map. All of those are projects working with the community and working with the Siuslaw and the ODFW research. And we have volunteers that are working on the Seabird project and Sea Star monitoring project. And so Brant cormorants nesting, largest mainland breeding colony in the Pacific, and then the highest concentration of murrelet on the Oregon coast, and was recently in 2012 designated as a globally significant important bird area. An IBA, I'll go into that a little bit more later. So here are just some of the species that we have visitors, and this is a murrelet ready to feed its chick, a little forage fish. So there's a oyster catcher project, community science project working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the community that's going coastwide. And Seabird monitoring project that's happening coastwide. And this important bird area program, Oregon Audubon and all of the partners move forward with identifying IBAs, important bird areas. This is under BirdLife International's project that started in the mid-1980s. And so we have designated 100 important bird areas around the state, and 30 of them on the coast. We nominated some ocean important bird areas called marine IBAs. So Heceta Banks, Perpetua Bank Stonewall is identified as a marine important bird area. And the terrestrial side, it's a Tier 1 key watershed under the Northwest Forest Plan. But when we think about the ocean, you realize that this issue of connectivity within the ocean, you've got species from all over the Pacific coming to feed in the California current. So that's right off the coast here. So that's when we came forward with this marine important bird area concept. And then by chance, Cheryl came out with a really excellent article in Natural History related to Into the Blue Serengeti. It's about species in the California current. After they tagged them, 22 different species, and documented their movement in the Pacific, you could see how their move come on from all over the Pacific into the California current. Then within that, we have this marine IBA program, and it's a B2B strategy, Baja to Barrow, Baja, Alaska to Barrow, Baja, Mexico to Barrow, Alaska. And so we've got identified 200 sites, 33 million seabirds, 150 species. So it's really a unbelievable effort by ornithologists, community science researchers about this effort. So the marbled murrelet listed under the Endangered Species Act and now has been uplisted to an endangered status, which means that they'll have to, or they have already started on writing a recovery plan and a monitoring strategy. So it's a big deal and very significant. It's dependent on older forest conditions. And our area, this Cummins 10-mile block from Cape Perpetua down, has been identified as a globally significant important bird area. The reason globally significant is that it can be an IBA, important bird area, a hemispheric important bird area, or globally significant. And so when we gathered the data and gave it to the BirdLife International, they said it hits that highest threshold of globally significant. So you realize that some areas are ecological hotspots for species that are dependent on older forest, like the murrelet. And so it was verified when the Crescent City Research did nearshore surveys throughout the whole Northwest, West Coast. And you've got, these are, the blue lines are numbers of birds per kilometer. And then those large ones are right here at Cummins 10-mile block. No surprise, it's because Sayusla National Forest and the two wildernesses are right there. So they're feeding in the near shore and then nesting in that older forests that are in the wilderness and the Sayusla. And so this, and I was on the marbled murrelet research team in the early 90s, and this was by chance the first murrelet nest that the research team found. If you look to the tree, go all the way to the top, then look to the right, you'll see a small hole. And if you look closely on that, you'll actually see the head of the adult. So that's the first nest we found in Oregon. But they are dependent on older forest conditions. They don't survive well when the forest is fragmented because of edge effects and nest predation. And of course, they're not only connected to the health of the forest, but they're connected to the health of the nearshore, forage fish. And so this idea of a protected status in the nearshore, as well as having conservation strategies in the uplands, is a very complementary landscape and oceanscape conservation effort. And this would be a nest cup on a nesting platform. So you're up on the top of the tree looking down on it. The average nest is about 170 feet. And just I'll make this announcement now. July 18th and 19th, we're going to have our murrelet survey again. It's about over the 15th year, and we do education the night before on the 18th, then an early morning survey on the 19th. So you can go to that website and then sign up for that if you're interested, or if you have questions. This is a morning survey. They fly in about 50 miles an hour and can be as high as 1,000 feet and could go from the near shore into the forest as far away as 50 miles. and they fly 50 miles an hour. So you got this really unique seabird that's connected to the health of the forest as well as the health of the ocean. And these are friends that have been a part of various projects over the years. And I wish Jim Gerdeman was around to say thank you for him. He was an inspiration. That's Janice. She's been a part of the Oregon Shores. And View the Future, folks. This has just been a really joy to have these other partners that have been a part of these efforts for a long time. And Angel Job Corps is one of the forestry crews I get to work with. And I get to work and attempt to influence the Forest Service management. So this is a project in down at Cape Creek, south of Big Creek, near Heceta Head, in terms of improving watershed function through road obliteration, trying to bring back natural conditions in the floodplain. Just one example out of projects that we attempt to influence. And this was a project that has been in our community's priority list for, well, since the mid-'80s. And now it's been secured through acquisition. And Evan and the Watershed Council, working with Parks, have also moved forward with a restoration strategy on Big Creek. That's the Big Creek south of 10 Mile. And it's really an impressive project. And it's a joy for us to be a part of that, to see that it should be protected and move forward with a acquisition and then a restoration effort. And this is an OD, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife research project that's been going on since the early 90s. And it's really, it complements what has been going on the terrestrial side. And that team of folks there in the bottom corner were a part of the Big Creek acquisition strategy. And again, this is the research project. That's Chris with the ODFW research, and he was the one who initiated, Steve Johnson initiated the project in the early 90s. And so it's a huge commitment by the agency. It's very impressive. And of course you get multiple age steelhead, coho, steelhead, Chinook, and chum. And we have a good data set that's heading in the right direction. That in-stream project was part of a basin-wide effort with the Forest Service and with ODFW. They did pre-data monitoring for 6 years, and then the in-stream project went in the early 90s when it was in the bottom there. And then we've slowly seen this increasing in abundance, and they're monitoring out migrant production, which are smolts going into the ocean. And so it's a good trajectory of telling the story. It's heading in the right direction. And Yulican was a surprise for the agency to see that they've actually are successfully spawning and rearing in 10 Mile Creek. And we had them look, and they're also in Big Creek. And it's really quite the story that nobody really knew that it was happening. But now it's been consistently showing up in the smolt trap. Maybe you've heard about it, Yulican, candlefish. It actually was considered when the first colonists came here, and they would see this fish that actually was very oily, and they would dry them and use them as candles, and very productive. And Native Americans would use them as help in preservation of different foodstuffs. And that's an example of in-stream projects, slowing water down, creating habitat. And the goal, of course, is to increase survivorship of the juvenile salmonids, so coho and steelhead, Chinook. And that's the smolt trap that they, part of the research project that goes on for about 4 months of the year. And the field trip to Big Creek, that's part of that acquisition. And that's, again, put in stream to create complexity and create little habitat features for increasing survival of salmonids. And this is another one of our partners, Angel Job Corps Forestry Crew. They're a part of our team that they get to work on real projects, creating snags and creating, dealing with invasive species and planting trees. They're north of Yachats, and for the forestry crew, it's really a built-in success for us to be able to work with them. And this is part of the nearshore monitoring on a murrelet survey. On this particular year, it was too foggy to really get much in the nearshore. And then, of course, when you talk about seabirds, you've got to talk about forage fish. And most folks aren't really savvy. When you say forage fish, it's a suite of species. Smelt, sardines, krill, squid, all of them fit into that category. There was a big push for the conservation community to get a forage fish management plan in place in federal waters and in state waters. And so it's a big deal for murrelet plus other seabirds. And you can see this food web that's totally linked to the health of a lot of the fish that folks want to catch up the food chain. And that was 2016. And so you can see that Chinook, and as well as seabirds, as well as sharks, rays, marine mammals are all connected to the health of forage fish. And lamprey, herring, other species that they catch in the trap, Pacific lamprey. And sea lion caves, the haul out at sea lion caves, it's pretty impressive certain times of the year. When you think about the food web, you think about how dealing with peregrine falcons and the prey base for them, and how this species was at risk, as was the eagle, as was the pelican. And there were some big decisions that were made, and DDT was banned, and the eggshells and everything was then sturdy enough to be successful reproduction. And it's common for us to see peregrines and eagles, and it's a success story. Hardly folks aren't very aware of. And when we think about dippers, hardly anybody would think about potential for contaminants. But the reality of it is we've got some problems in many of our watersheds, and it has a direct link to not only salmon recovery, but also some of our species like the dipper. So this is the Clean Water Act map that shows streams that are on the 303D list as water quality impaired. If it's red, it's on the list as impaired, and DEQ has to write a management plan, total maximum daily load, a management plan to bring it into compliance. So we're on the Central Coast there. Some of us are working with DEQ in the community to try and write a TMDL that would actually improve watershed water quality for our community and for salmon recovery. And the 804 was a big deal, and that's along, actually goes along the whole coast, but right in Yachats, it goes across Yachats, and then up into the top of the Cape Perpetua. And it's, if you haven't been on that trail, I urge you to go check it out. Charlotte was a real hero on that, as was Fran. And then that's the research project that gets to be a field stop for students throughout the year. And dealing with climate issues, there's a couple of papers out called Natural Climate Solutions and legislation that's in discussion in Salem. It is a significant issue, significant piece of the puzzle. It's just part of the strategy that we need to deal with for climate change. As are beavers. And so we've got some background information here, and we've got information on our MidCoast Watershed Council website with a background information as well as videos that are produced by a number of folks. And it's a significant issue for conservation, water quality, and the 60+ species that are linked to this keystone species. And again, these are the footprint from Cape Falcon through Cascade Head, Otter Rock, Cape Perpetua, and and the coalition of folks that are working on that effort. And we do the symposium every year. I think we're 10 years now. And this is just 1 year of an effort with Dr. Piercy and a number of folks. And just another project is the pelican monitoring coastwide effort. So the partnerships are really critical. So this is Drew, and he runs a number of the motels in Yachats. He's a supporter of our ocean conservation work. It's truly a partner. It's really a solid situation he's right on the 804 trail, very supportive of what we've got going. And it's really a solid relationship. So how you can get involved. Marble Murrelet, Seabird Monitoring. We've got a Cape Perpetua Collaborative, MidCoast Watershed Council, a nursery you could work at, planting, cleanup events, surf rider as opportunities. These are things that are ongoing on our footprint, not only on the terrestrial side, but also in the estuaries and on the beach. So I urge you to check those out and see what would feel good to be engaged and be a part of the solution. And here's another with links to other volunteering opportunities at the Cape. And then here are links to a number of the documents that I've mentioned before. So here are photo credits, and Zach, I love those large panorama, big picture. He did a great job on those photos. And we've established a BioBlitz series, and if you haven't plugged into those, they are pure fun. And we have a training on our Cape Perpetua YouTube channel, and then you can join that project. And we have a collaborative that we're a part of around Cape Perpetua as well. Okay, here are some of our partners again. City of Yachats, Mackenzie River Trust, ACVA, Oregon Coast Visitors Association, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, SAUSLA, ODFW, MidCoast, Surfrider, Coast Range. And then just a reminder about our Murrelet event in July. Okay. See if there's any questions. So if you have any questions, we'll post this. And if you have any questions, send Tom and I a note and we'll get back to you. And pay attention for field trips and opportunities for engagement. Thank you very much.